Okay, so you are thinking about designing a logo. Maybe you have a small business or your freelance gigs are getting bigger, or maybe you already have a logo, but you're thinking like this should maybe be better. Well, there are a lot of great design tips and tricks on the internet, on YouTube for designing a logo, and we even have tons of tutorials on that as well here at Kittl. But today, I want to give you 3 questions that you should ask yourself before ever even starting to design a logo. Now, of course, these aren't the only 3 ultimate questions you should ask yourself. There are a ton, but I think it's a good place to get started. Now, hey, if we're just meeting, my name is Drew, and if you're new to Kittl, that's our online design tool, which we're going to talk more about later. So let's get into the first question now. Now, your first question to ask yourself should be, who is my target audience? Now, this question breaks down into so many other minor questions like, where does my audience live? What is the target age of your consumer? Are you going after a specific gender? What is their lifestyle? Even things like where they live. Even if you're an online store, finding out where your target consumer lives, either in the US or outside the US, whatever it is, still very important to consider. Even things like income are going to set you up for success if you can understand and learn that about your target audience. So let's give an example. Let's say you're in the skincare realm, you need a logo, and your target audience is slightly younger. Let's say the age range is somewhere between 18 and 35. Now, that is a pretty broad gap because you have 18 and early 20s, which is younger, in a college, on a college budget. But over here, you also have late 20s, probably families, early 30s, that are maybe accustomed to a couple of more finer things in life. They have a full-time job, nice car, whatever it is. Now, this isn't a bad thing. The range is not a bad thing because when you look at that range, it's just data for you to understand how to best serve your audience. So we want to look at things like, what are their lifestyle? What are the types of other brands that these consumers might be using? And these are things that you can think of while you're starting to get into the design process for your own logo. So we want to know what they like. What is their lifestyle? This age 18 to 35, what are the different things that they're attracted to? And I'm going to go out on a whim and say that it's probably not a super old vintage-esque logo for your skincare brand. Something that probably looks more like a brewery, this kind of vintage-esque script style, old classic embellishing typography is probably not going to be best to attract it. But hey, look, be true to you, be true to your company and your values, but of course, we want to know our target audience and cater to them as well. Because at the end of the day, I think it's going to be more about them, it's going to be more about this plurality of people than it is about you. And I think Marty Neumeier says it best when he says that a brand is not really your logo, it's more of a feeling that people get when they think of you, when you come to mind. Of course, I'm paraphrasing, but you get the idea. It's about them, and we want to serve them best. So do your research, find out your target audience, then start designing your logo. Okay, question number 2 is, what are your brand values or your company values? Now, like I just mentioned in the previous tip, it's important to be true to you and your values, but it can be difficult when designing a logo if you don't have that. So a first good step to do is go ahead and identify what your company or your brand values are. Well, now you might be thinking, why do brand values matter for my logo? How does that influence that? Well, let's set up an example. Let's say that you value creativity. I know that's super vague, but let's say you're going to set up an online store, an online marketplace for people to sell their digital artwork as prints. And I know I'm painting a picture that probably already exists, but stay with me. Now, obviously you value creativity. You're probably an artist. That's why you set up the store. But let's say you have this intense value for eco-friendliness and you are just super passionate about saving the oceans from trash or saving the rainforests or maybe some endangered species. And the way that you personify that is 10% of every profit from every print on your store goes to supporting this natural cause. Now, that's an extreme, intense value that you have. And so how can you reflect that in your logo? It might sneak in as a wave or a leaf or whatever. I know I'm saying things that are overdone, but hopefully the gears are turning and you're starting to understand how values can really influence your logo and how that's personified to people, which brings up the other side of this coin, which is brand personality is more about how you want to be perceived, what your tone is, and how people think of you when they see you or your logo. If we think back to our eco-friendliness value, then you might be capturing those people just due to the fact that you are eco-friendly or a nature activist or something. But people that aren't searching those key terms, for example, eco-friendliness, art, print, marketplace, they're probably going to find you another way. So for example, if you're dealing with insurance or finance or something like that, you are going to do, use, and look like things that evoke trustworthiness, comfortable, caring, things like that. You're probably going to use bold typography. You're probably going to use colors that are associated with that. Blue is a very common example of that, but you get the idea. You probably won't use super thin or ornate lines or vintage typography when you're in this insurance or finance niche. You're probably not going to use a ton of colors, and you're not going to probably evoke a whimsical or fun tone. But if we think back to our art print store that values eco-friendliness, maybe colors is what you need. Maybe this fun, exciting, whimsical style is exactly what you need to attract the kind of audience that you're going for. So we've already kind of gone back to part one, the question one as well, knowing your audience. So these two things are playing hand in hand. So think about your brand values, what's important to you, how you want to be perceived, and then think about how that can influence your logo. Okay, last question is, who are your competitors? Now, it's likely rare that you have created something that has absolutely no competitorship, or at least some businesses that are already doing this well. And maybe you have, kudos to you if you have, but hey, it's not a bad thing. And I don't want you to be scared of getting into a market or doing some kind of service or business that already has successful clientele. And the reason that is so important is because you already know it's good. You already know it works. And it's a key indicator of knowing what people like and want. So at the most basic level, you should at least know who your competitors are, or your immediate competitors, so you know how to differentiate yourself, or at least make sure you're playing the part along with the rest of this niche. So let's set up an example. Let's say you're starting a bakery in a more rural area where maybe more elderly, older people live. It's unlikely that you're probably going to use super thin type with geometric shapes and this kind of very super clean modern space all over the place. I mean, maybe you do, of course, be true to you and your values, but if you look at your competitors, what you'll probably find is a mix of vintage badge logos, or maybe baseball style script with vintage embellishment or something like that that evokes this timelessness, this old, well, you know, part of the craft, right? Making bread, it evokes the craft, and you get that sense of these people have been around for a while. Now remember, the target audience plays a lot into this. Question one, who is your target audience? And notice I said rural area. Anyway, that plays a lot into what you are going to do with your logo, is knowing your target audience. And so setting up that location indicator is very important, and it's going to look a lot different than in this outskirts area than if you were to set up a bakery in maybe the middle of New York, for example. So we've kind of touched on it already, but there's basically two main ways you can do this. The first one is you can adjust to what your competition is already doing. So let's think of another example. Why do barbershops and garage auto shops all kind of have this same look? Well, it's because they're using a design language that people are already very familiar with. They know immediately when they look at something like, oh, that's probably a barbershop, or oh, that's where I can get my oil changed, or whatever. And so people are already understanding, they already are comprehending what this logo is about, so then therefore I know what the business is about. So if you're not sure what that looks like, it's important to go and look at your competitors. Now, the second way you can do this is to offer something very different. Maybe there's a gap, or just you want to elevate to something maybe higher end, and that's okay as well. Let's go back to our bakery example, and maybe we want to serve some kind of Dominique Ansel style pastries that are not the normal thing that, you know, grandma's cabin or whatever is going to make. Then maybe it makes sense to do something a little bit different with your logo, because you're targeting a completely different audience that wants something more fun and exotic, right? Again, both of these are totally valid ways, and maybe you even want to try to mix them. Maybe you want to have that timelessness mixed with modern aesthetic, and it can be done. I'm just letting you know it always is important to go and check your competitors before you put pen to paper. Well, I hope these questions have been helpful for you before you start that logo design process. And by the way, if you haven't heard of Kittl yet, that is our online design tool. We have made it super easy for beginners to use, but also right at home for master designers that might be familiar with tools that you would see in Illustrator or Affinity Designer. We've just done all of the heavy lifting. We've basically made magic, making complex design easier for you. So if you want to give it a try, you can sign up for free using the link down in the description, and that's why I mention it, because it's absolutely perfect for logo design. In fact, we have thousands of logo templates that you can get started with or inspire you as you're thinking about your logo. There's everything from premium fonts to texture effects to text effects to a massive illustration library, all in one place for you to use for your next creative project. So I'd love for you to check it out and give it a try. Now, if you want to see more tips and advice on branding, I have a playlist right here on my right that you can check out. I know that you're going to find those helpful. Thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe to Kittl so you don't miss any of the upcoming tutorials and other advice videos just like this one. Until the next video, create magic.